Okay. Welcome everybody to a new feature here on the Fantasy Thinker, the short fiction side hustle, which a name I stole from my partner in crime here, Varsha. How you doing today, Varsha?
I'm doing reasonably well, Jared.
And so Varsha's, of course, from the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain. So go check that out when you get a chance, and you'll probably see me there as well.
Yeah, probably in
Um,
every single video that's on.
um, so today, for our short fiction uh, talk about discussion, we are talking about Steven Erikson's "The Devil Delivered," not the other tales, just "The Devil Delivered." We'll get to the other ones eventually, but "The Devil Delivered" is I guess it's a novella. You would consider that, right?
hmm
About
It's
100
about
pages or
one
so, 130.
140.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And this novella came out in 2004 or 5, 2004,
I thought it
2005,
came
published
out.
in 2005. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Was the collection published after the Cripple God then?
Yes, the collection was
Ah,
published in 20. This collection was published in
okay.
2013 or something like that. But this original short story was published in 2005, and it had a cover that looked like this. Um,
But the horse.
Originally, yeah. Which I'm imagining that's Sitting Bull because he
Mm.
appears as a vision to one of the characters in the story,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's kind of an odd cover actually because it like the red letters blend into the red background and it's kind of hard to read. Um, so I was like, I mean, I think the colors are cool, but I don't think it's the best design in the world. but
Mm.
but
Is, is that
yeah,
blue patch supposed to show the hole in the ozone?
yes, it is. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, that's exactly what
Okay,
it is. Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and of course, the fact that the hole in the ozone shows you space and the reddish clouds that it's dividing, uh, does they don't look like the most healthiest clouds in the world, of course. Um, which, leads us into what this story is about. It's, kind of a near future dystopian, not quite apocalyptic, but almost there. Um future that Erickson's telling us is it's grim. It's a grim future. That it's being outside, just being outside can give you sickness and radiation sickness and what have you. So it's not a very good view of what's coming soon.
Except some people and creatures have found a way to survive.
Yeah, yeah, and that's that was interesting because he has these little asides where he points that out that some creatures are adapting, evolving, and learning how to manage this new state of reality of the
Mhm.
world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so, what were your overall impressions, Fasher, on this
Um,
story?
I really enjoyed this book, and I think I finished Malazan a few months ago, and I've been wanting to work through other of Erickson's works. There are, of course, the other Malazan books as well, but I've acquired some of his non-Malazan things, and this was one of them. And I was really glad that you asked me to read along with you because I really enjoyed this book, and it it felt very like the Malazan by Erickson in that the each individual section it felt like it could stand on its own, and there was a lot that I liked about each one. I highlighted intensely throughout the book, and there were bits of a puzzle that were building up and maybe not quite finished by the end of the book, but we have something of a picture about what's
Mm.
going on here. And yeah, I really enjoyed the overall experience of it. Some of my favorite sections were towards the end, the conversations between William and his father. I think he was dreaming them or remembering them from
Yeah.
his childhood, and that those touch on so many topics about how the legacy of the environment to the later generations. And there was the bit about consciousness and whether it all just arises from meat. And yeah, there was just so many topics there that I think I am personally interested in, and I loved his approach to like exploring them through this conversation. And yeah, and then there was a lot of different bits and pieces too. It reminded me a little bit of this the bit about the accelerated evolution, and how there may be some uh, edge populations that will adapt and survive through the semi-apocalyptic situation, or probably apocalyptic situation. It reminded me of Last and First Men by Olaf Stapledon that we read for the SF Masterworks reading group a while ago.
Yeah.
That went through several cycles of brink of extinction, but then there's always one or two groups that survives and expands. Maybe a little bit at the bites, but not quite. Like I think the topic that's being explored is more similar to Last and First Men. And yeah, I think overall I did love it quite a lot. Those are my high level impressions.
Yeah, cool. I was actually quite thrilled when I finished it because I was just like, it was like, okay, yeah, this is classic Erickson in that he really just throws so much at you to make you think about a ton of stuff. And but what I found fascinating was because um, was even back in 2005, he seemed to have his finger on the button about what um, what's going on right now, because it's of course is a huge environmental theme in this story, and that's like the biggest theme, and how we're systematically, destroying the earth, and so that that is the biggest thing. Of course, we saw the ozone depletion, and that's the main problem with um, with the environmental situation in the story right now. And the but he also really had his finger on the um, advent of the internet and how it influences people. And I really liked
Hmm.
um, how he did that for back then, because it's like I said in my review of this, it's so reminiscent of, you can go on a Discord server,
Mm.
and that's pretty much what it looks like.
Yeah.
People throwing conspiracy theories back and forth at each other,
Mm.
and uh and and talking about stuff like that without really knowing everything,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Just
and just throwing out statements, and only having half knowledge about stuff. And he represented that in the and he put it in that format, of
yeah.
people just what do you call that?
Chat, I think.
Tweet chat. Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
That's the word I was looking for, yeah,
Yeah.
in the chat format. And
Hmm.
I found that fascinating because, I mean, chat formats did exist back then, but they
Hmm.
were very primitive compared to what
Mm.
they are now. But it still captured that essence of what it is today,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
found that utterly fascinating. And, like, there was a recent incident, um, right up here in Massachusetts where I am,
Hmm.
where a, young Air Force guy, military guy, was actually putting, uh, secret documents on
Mm.
his Discord server, and he got arrested.
Oh, wow.
And that just tells you, like, that kind of danger is there. It is out
Mm.
there,
Hmm.
and I think he just kinda captured that very well,
Yeah.
in his
Yeah.
story.
When was the whole WikiLeaks thing? Was that was
Hmm.
later of that decade, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
it was later. I think it was during the Obama administration, but I
mm,
can't remember exactly when.
mm,
But yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, yeah.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, there's a lot. And I think the technology that's hinted at in this book, it was pretty interesting. Like, what did you make of the streamers, the and the riffs that they made out of William's experience out in the I forget the name of the region, but in the Lakota Nation, when
Yeah.
he's out exploring, he has a bunch of people following him. And then towards the end, I don't remember if they were mentioned before this, but towards the end, we really focus on them, the streamers who make riffs off of his experience. And it felt almost like it was describing something like a simulation, and people build different simulation environments based on the videos. I think he streams videos back out, and you could get lost in it for hours and hours. So bringing that back into, and I think one of the ending concluding scenes is one of the streamers saying, make sure you have someone with you when you get on these riffs because you will starve yourself to death if you stay here long enough. So,
Yep.
so um, that alongside the discussion around consciousness is like just the light hints of simulation. Is it real? And you're experiencing it, and what that means for you. It made me think about a lot of those things. So yeah, the technology again, like a lot of I think sci-fi books that we've discussed, talked about, and liked in the past, it just hints at enough to make you think about the implications. I think,
Hmm.
and not but it's fascinating um, what is on the page.
Yeah, it is fascinating, I think it speaks to the because I think there was some talk about how people would get sucked into either um like going down the rabbit hole of the internet, basically,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Mhm.
and people would do it with video games, but they'd also do it with just internet search and just getting lost in that search and
Yes.
keep going. And that whole idea of, yeah, make sure you eat.
I don't know what to talk about, Jared. I've never spent 3 hours just browsing.
Yeah. Um, and, and it's funny because he also brings up drones
Yes.
in this, which of
Mhm.
course those are a major factor in a lot of different spheres of the world today. And but I love how even when even when he's kind of giving it from the drone's point of view in the recording, even though it's a technology, it's still written in a poetical fashion,
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
was like, that's fascinating, how he can make a drone sound poetical.
Yes. And it's contemplating life and death. It's
Yeah,
saying, it's wondering if it's realized that it's part of a bigger whole, and maybe death means becoming part of that whole.
yes.
Yes. And okay, I'm not super familiar with this philosophy, but isn't that sort of streaks of that there is this universal consciousness, and death brings you closer, or reincarnation cycles bring you closer to that. I wondered if that was exploring that idea from the point of view of the technological kind of sort of consciousness.
Wow, that's pretty deep. Can an AI consciousness be reborn as a
Mhm.
regular consciousness?
Yes. Can androids dream of electric sheep?
Ah, yeah, there you go. Bingo, right there. Um, yeah, yeah, it says, yeah, he said the drone says, "Until the lesser definition was fully conjoined to the greater definition, full from knowable into unknowable," And
Mm,
it's that's like, how you getting that kind of poetical picture from a drone?
yeah.
It's really wild, and it's not It's ambiguous too, and it's purposely ambiguous.
Mhm.
There's definitely no answer at all in any of this story. As a matter of fact, one of the themes is answers are extinct, and
Yeah.
that's one of the things the characters say early on in the story. And so I love that too because I'm all about that. I don't like things that hit you over the head and
Mhm.
tell you this is the answer and this is what it was. That's the whole point of something like this, I think,
Yeah.
especially the thought experiment. It's just to make you think about all these questions he brings up.
Yes, and there are so many, right? I think we already talked about 7 or 8, and
Yeah,
I'm sure we're missing a few. Uh, what it was something I wanted to ask you with respect that oh, yeah, the Martian civilization apparently that,
hmm
supposedly is what do they call it? The restitution? The
yeah. I don't
resetting?
remember. Yeah, I
Mhm,
remember he mentioned that. Yeah, um, yeah, and it was something about uh, connecting with that Martian civilization too as well.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, was it about basically resetting the history of evolution to include the possibility that the human civilization or like the first humans on Earth were seeded by the Martian civilization?
mhm.
And they even have a conversation about how they basically destroyed Mars and now they're destroying Earth. So it is a dead land now, and now it's and Earth is headed that way, I guess, is the conversation they have. And that whole thread was very interesting too. And again, like nobody comes down and explains it all. It just sort of hints of it throughout the story, puts it together into like the restitution is mentioned, I think, in the first few pages, and then and you think the way it is introduced in the beginning that it might play a big role, and it does in the fact that it ties into what I think is the central theme of the book, the environmental themes, but
Mm, yeah.
um but it's not main to the story, if that makes sense, because
Yeah.
like you have this big discord chat about like discord like chat about restitution, and then nothing for a while, and then we're just told in a casual conversation that yeah, it's fine if everybody knows about that.
Yeah. No, it's cool, and then he also hinted at that in, his novel Rejoice, um, A Knife to the
Yeah.
Heart. He
Hmm.
hinted also at the Martian, connection there,
Hmm.
and so that's definitely something that, um, Erickson has, on his mind a lot as far as
Hmm.
for his science fiction, stuff. But,
Yeah.
yeah, and, of course, with his background you see some of his background in archaeology in this story,
Hmm.
as well as he has, I know he has a great love of the, American Indian,
Hmm.
civilizations and different tribes and what have you, and he, I know he borrows from that for some of his, fiction, even in the Malazan Book of the Fallen,
Hmm.
for some of the peoples in there, and it definitely is using it in this story as well, because he had a basically part of the premise is that the Lakota Nation is its own thing again,
Hmm.
and but it's of course being destroyed by the environmental
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
chaos, and but I love how he gives us all these little archaeological hints at stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that like we're still finding stuff out, and
Hmm.
we still don't know everything that went on in the past,
Yeah.
and that's a few of the statements in this story reflect that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And I forget, is William an anthropologist? But there's that aspect of exploring and figuring out the
Yeah,
current evolution. So it's both the past and what the future might look like. We're getting both ends of that spectrum. And yeah.
yeah, Yeah, he definitely is looking into the history of historical figures like Sitting Bull, which he, in his madness, he's talking to a lot, and um, and yeah, and he gets into that a lot with that character, and which is where the answers are extinct comes from, um, and the idea of extinction is a concept, but it's not just of different animal species and different stuff, and different cultural um, aspects of the human race, but also the extinction of information.
Mm,
And
yeah.
that ties into the technology as well, and the fact that information can be extinct just as
Mm,
fast or even more quickly than actual physical, you know, uh, beings and creatures and what have you, and even landscapes. And
yeah. That's
so,
cool. Yeah.
yeah,
I
so it's
like
just
that.
I love that whole idea of extinction being a
Mm,
greater thing than just what we know it as.
yeah. Yeah. And there is also the counterbalance of it's not all quite doom and gloom. There's also certain populations that evolve and adapt under pressure and they will survive. There will be future generations, it just won't be you. uh, so
Yeah, wasn't there like mention of new types of bison or something like that?
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and a snake that
that's right, the snake.
um
Yeah,
had adapted to blindness, like it had developed other senses because the hole above the ozone was making it was blinding all the animals and
yeah,
humans even for that matter.
yeah.
And there is this mention of I really love that discourse around how I think when the Martians supposedly seeded the planet, there was just one species and they evolved, and I I forget what it was, but I think it was that they adapted less easily than whatever they're doing now. Like there are many edge populations. They lost that when they seeded the world with just like one human species, but now that they have many edge populations, not the central population that is evolving. Uh, yeah, I'd like to go read more about how all of this works. See, I think I did some very quick googling. I found very little, but I'd like to read more in detail. But this is fascinating as a
Yeah.
subject.
Did you get
Yeah,
lost down the rabbit hole?
yeah, a little bit
A little bit.
down the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, and, of course, then he also brings up some social issues,
Yes.
especially the of course, the idea of, the biggest social issue for, Native American history, of course, is that idea of manifest destiny that the Europeans had when they came over and, basically committed genocide, and
Mhm.
he brings up that topic, and he brings up that discussion,
Mm.
um, in a very straightforward, brutal manner that really lays it out, like,
Yeah.
he, he he, uh, he brings up he says that manifest destiny is like it's a manufactured idea by those in power to sell off genocide as a policy.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
what the Europeans did, and that's nothing new. That's a something that's been talked about a lot. Um, but he also has the viewpoint of some characters in here that it was a practical practice for those in power at the time, and that it was really sobering in this in its contextualization of human history and
Mm.
what was going on many times, not just the European expansion to North America, but just throughout history in general,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and warfare in general. And I love the term the momentary logic of brutality. That was one of
Yeah.
the lines in there, and I was
Mhm.
just like, "Wow, that's wow,
That
that hit me out of left field."
yes, that sounds familiar. Is that the section where, was it Jack Tree, talks to one of the NOAC representatives and says, "Oh, so you're going to save us by destroying us?" When she said, "I'm gonna put all of these sanctions on you if you don't, open
Mhm.
the nation to us again." And it's I what is the conflict again? They want to continue drilling oil there, and the Lakota Nation said, "Heck no, we're done with
Yeah,
that." And so I think they said that they'll impose all kinds of sanctions, and I think they don't want, and also they are building a space elevator. I guess NOAC wants rights to that. Um,
yeah,
there's
they want use of the land, they wanted access to resources.
Mhm,
The same old story that's been going on for
mhm,
since industrialization, and,
yeah,
um, yeah, and that's the battle, that's the conflict is the Lakota Nation is trying to keep them out. The corporations are too powerful,
mhm,
um, and they have all this influence and all this, backing,
yeah,
um, and I wasn't sure it doesn't really resolve, by the end of
yeah,
the story,
yeah. It
y you
doesn't.
know, poor William, he's done for, but but, and it's mostly his story, it's mostly his viewpoint,
Mhm,
as diluted as his viewpoint gets because he's losing his mind, but, uh, so nothing gets resolved per
mhm,
se, but
yeah,
it's the struggle. It's the struggle to
yeah.
of that conflict. That's the main point of it.
The taste that we are left with towards the end is that the Lakota Nation is not bowing down, and
Mhm.
they have the superior technology that they will use at their discretion. If they are working with a corporation that's building that tech, right? And I guess they're gonna go build medicine wheel too on Mars. So they didn't resolve it, but they are still left with the upper hand. So like you it's still like a okay, they're kind of sort of winning. They probably have to still put up a lot of fights, and yeah. So I like that. I like the open ended nature of it, but a little bit of maybe there's this future for them.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it's great, and it's and, and back to that, the, he also back to the, uh the momentary logic of brutality.
Mhm.
He also turns it around
Mm.
and said, if the roles were reversed,
Yeah.
the same thing would happen the other way. If it was the Native Americans who discovered Europe,
Yeah.
and that was from, um, Jack Tree's discussion with, I forget who it was, but they were related to William somehow, and,
Mm. Was it old Jim or
old Jim, yeah,
yeah?
old Jim old Jim and Jack Tree were talking about, history in general and
Mm.
their nation, their Lakota Nation, and, so it was interesting that, he was saying, "We're no different. If we'd been the ones with the technological advantage, and if we'd been the ones landing on European shores, we'd have been just as brutal. Look out among the tribes in the continent and south of here, you'll find slavery, genocide, endemic warfare, cruelty." They already had that amongst
Yeah.
themselves,
Yeah.
and just like the rest of human history, that's always been an ongoing struggle. And so I just like how he gave it its due. All the arguments, all the different viewpoints, all the things that you can research and look into, and um, he just gave it the dimensions, the mentions it deserved, the
Mm.
two-sided arguments, the it wasn't just a one trick pony,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really appreciated that section. I forget where it came, but I remember that line too, and it hit hard.
Mhm.
And also, and if I remember correctly, that conversation also led to, and I think you mentioned it, that um, what it says about human nature, the inclination towards brutality, because it's
Yeah,
not
right.
specific to who is currently I guess the the kingpin. It Whoever is able to will seize power,
Yeah,
and that's
right.
kind of sad. I think there was some additional commentary there about that, or maybe that statement in and of itself is that commentary, and I think it's brilliant. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, those who have the power are, most likely going to be the ones who are, in their grasp to keep the power. They're going
Yeah.
to be the ones committing the atrocities and so forth, but it's not a simple fact that it was, one-sided throughout all history, you know?
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
I just like that he brings up that conversation, and he brings up that the different viewpoints to have. Pretty cool
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also this stuff about remembering the past. I think one of the opening
Mm.
scenes, William is looking at some of the relics that old Jim has saved.
Yeah.
And I this line caught my eye. I was looking through my highlights. He told me it's up to me now to remember. Uh, I think that's Jim, right? Yeah, and I love Jim's backstory with uh, the grandpa and what happened to his mom and father.
Oh, yeah, I
Mm,
forgot about that, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he mentions that, um yeah, because he mentioned that they actually have a history with Sitting Bull. I guess Sitting Bull knew his grandfather or something like that,
Hmm.
and, so um, that leader later leads on to the visions,
Hmm.
that William is having and
Yeah.
talking to Sitting Bull, the ghost.
And old Jim found William by following ghosts. He's like, "How can I tell anyone that that I did that?"
Yeah. Yep. So so a little bit of the, possibility of the fantastic being thrown in there,
Mhm. Yes.
which was cool. It was just, really neat that, but they tied it into the he tied it into, like, the spirituality
Mm,
of the Lakota nation and
yeah.
the people and stuff like that, and so it was really, I thought it was pretty cool how
Mm,
he tied all that together, along with all the other technology and stuff that he threw
yeah.
in there. Yeah.
I I love how it feels. It evokes such a sense of the deep past, but it's also about the future. Like we've got space elevators and ghosts from coyote ghosts from millennia, no, millions of years ago,
Yeah.
in the same book. Like, and they are a connecting thread throughout. I think that's brilliant. And both of those somehow manage to evoke the same sense of place, the same sense of, I guess, the human history associated with all of that, and I guess the history of the planet. Um, it's quite brilliant.
Yeah, and Coyote is a mythological figure in and of himself.
Mm.
He is worshipped as a spirit, a greater spirit,
Oh, I didn't
and
know that.
so
Mhm.
yeah, so some of the American Indian nations have that spirit totem, almost like a
Mm.
god type thing,
Mhm.
that they worship Coyote as a kind of a trickster type,
Oh, okay.
spirit, type god, and,
Nice.
so that, kinda ties into that feeling that, the Coyote was that, was he walks with Coyote, which means, like, and it's associated with ghost and
Mhm.
stuff like that, so it's pretty cool how he tied into that mythology into this as well. You know.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It it made me think of some scenes without spoiling anything. Some scenes with ghost wolves in Malazan, the
Mm,
coyotes. It had that little bit of sense of familiarity about it. But yeah, mostly
yeah. Well, I
the
mean,
story. Yeah, go ahead.
obviously his background in archaeology is playing big
Hmm.
time into what you pointed out with the sense of that's a deep sense of history,
Hmm.
and that's something he always has in all his
Hmm.
writing.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
just that deep sense of history that comes with it. You know.
Mm. Yeah. 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 It is, and it has a lot of the same feeling, like the things that I tend to think of when I think of Malas, and some of the things like I think Angela from Do Unicorns Read talked about the sweeping landscapes in Malas, and I think it is a not very somewhat destroyed landscape, I think, but it does evoke the sense of like large empty spaces, both with the discussion of Mars and with the discussion of like the region that's suffering under the ozone hole. And I guess these wolves, that the deep history, the deep past of the world. And yeah, I guess that subtle blending of tech and magic.
Mm. Yeah, and the the setting was imagine just have being imagine just walking outside and having your eyes burned out.
Yes.
It's so scary when
Yeah.
you think about that.
Yes, it is.
And
um,
he described it like it was just like, "Ooh, that's frightening."
it is. And how that's introduced to you too, right? I think we first find out that somebody's blind, or maybe that creatures are blind. And the hole in the ozone, they kept referring to it as the hole, and that was it. But I only found out it was the hole in the ozone by reading the description. So it's not really clearly laid out. It's just like, yeah, something happened. And maybe someone a lot smarter than me would know that it's an ozone hole, but I didn't figure that out just from the book. The description told me that it was ozone
Mm.
hole.
Yeah, in typical Erickson fashion, he doesn't hold your hand, and he
Yeah.
it makes you figure it out by yourself.
Yeah.
But, um, yeah, yeah, you had to kinda put that together somehow
Hmm.
just by based upon what the atmosphere is doing to
Yeah.
the
Mm,
species and people, and based upon the fact that it's a it's a environmental theme,
mm,
so that's going to come into it, you know?
yeah.
And that was at the time this was written, that was a huge topic,
Mm.
um, the destruction of the ozone layer,
Oh, okay.
was
Okay.
a really big topic in 2000 early 2000s, and so it makes sense if you read it with the context of when it was written,
Yeah,
uh, you
that
know?
makes sense.
Yeah.
I I remember my cousin, we were in school at the time. She told me that she had a dream that a thief stole the ozone layer, and I had no idea what she was talking about. Um, but
Coyote, the trickster thief, he stole it.
yes. She had a dream of all the things for a thief to steal. She must have studied about the hole in the ozone in school at the time. But what was I going to say? Yeah, I thought the first few occurrences of hole, I thought we were talking about a big pit the in that region, maybe caused by a nuclear explosion or something.
Mm.
And then I think maybe I read the description, like the blurb afterwards, and I was like, "Oh, that's what hole is."
Alright. Yeah.
So this pretty line caught my eye again. I guess I was scrubbing through the highlights about the blind creatures, and they hunt at night amidst the hum and hiss of 1,000 new species of insect in 100,000 iridescent colors, reduced to gray beneath the moon.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, there's so much. I don't know. I have entire sections where I there's like one line in between and that I didn't highlight, and I only did that to keep things separate. But like the whole page is highlighted.
Yeah. Even the poem he has at the beginning
Oh,
and
yeah.
the end, he puts it in both places,
Mhm,
and the last 4 lines of the poem where it says, "Bread is darkness, wheat ill chance, and all around us wickedness waits." And that just evokes this imagery of, like, a failing wheat field that's
mm,
just not putting out what it used to, and it's all around us, and the wickedness waits, and, but also it gives you this sense of, bread is darkness, wheat ill chance. It gives you this sense of the, um, the taking over of all
mm,
this territory to grow wheat,
mm,
you know, was actually a bad thing, and
yeah,
that it exasperated the, environmental damage
mhm,
to the planet because it was purposefully restructured land, cleared land. It took away habitat from animals and species. It took away, um,
mm,
it changed the ecological system of a huge swath of area in the middle of the
mhm,
United States,
mm,
and I think that's what he's hinting at with just the with is part of those poems and those lines, and how much humans have changed the ecology just by developing wheat.
yeah, yeah,
And, and, so I think, and that's just, like, how he uses just poetical lines like that just to make those statements, which end up being pretty big
mm,
statements, but in such
yeah.
a little line, and it's just I love how he did that.
I like that. I didn't know what to make of those lines, but when you put it like that, I that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. That's
And the
just my interpretation, I could be completely wrong. Uh, so,
standard
Mr. Erickson, if
disclaimer.
you're listening and you wanna correct me, go ahead. But
Standard disclaimer to any reading, huh? And I like this, and all around us wickedness waits. Do you think that's a reference to the line you quoted earlier about what the logic of brutality was it?
Mhm.
That sort of that's the it's almost the default or we almost can't help ourselves taking
Yeah.
power no matter
'Cause
which group. Yeah.
right, because that logic of brutality is not j only humans being bad to other humans,
Mm.
it's also humans being bad to their surroundings, their the place they live, you
Mm.
know? Um, basically, basically shitting where you eat,
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
not a good thing.
Yeah. No. No, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
And for all that said, um, it this story, I don't think it's an easy read, this story at all, so anybody who's wondering, I think there is there is a lot of aspects to it that's a little disjointed, and you kinda gotta, like, "Oh, where am I?
mm.
What are we talking about now? Who are these people? I don't know who these people are."
Yeah.
And, so it does take a little while to really let it sink in, like, I was really lost the first 30 or 40 pages,
Mhm. Yeah.
and then things started to come around as the story went on, and then I kinda had when I was done, I kinda had to go back to those early pages and kind of like, "Oh, okay. Oh, that's what he was talking about. Oh, that's what was happening. Alright, now I get it."
Yeah.
So it wasn't an easy story to digest. You have to really think about it, so anybody who's listening and keep that in mind.
Mhm. Yeah. It does reward patience, and I think it is a very rewarding read in that you I love these stories where you sort of build parts of the picture throughout, like we talked about the Mars restitution bit, where it becomes kind of sort of clear towards the end what they're talking about. Uh, that you get little pieces of the puzzle and you put the whole picture together. And this story just has a lot of different puzzles and you put them all together. Like all the things we talked about, it goes from the space elevator to the coyotes from the deep past. uh, and all of those, like seeing the picture built together, especially in the form of, I think, William bonding with the Lakota Nation, like members of
Mhm.
and how they start to consider him one of their own. I think, yeah, it is a very rewarding read, and I suspect it would reward rereads. I meant to finish this book in time for a reread before our discussion, but as you know, Jared, I put my reading off to the last minute always. So,
No,
uh,
not you.
you didn't know that about
Right.
me. So, but I will be rereading the story because I think I would like to go back into it with an idea of the completed picture, and I think we'll find more, uh yeah, uh, even more, I think, than what I got from the first time.
Mhm. Well, just don't fall down a rabbit hole of continually rereading Erickson, because you can do that. I've done it. Yeah, so, overall, I would say this story is a success, and,
Yes,
uh, and it was just fascinating, interesting, confusing at times, but just ultimately, really fascinating, and,
yes.
any other last words you think,
um Not much that I haven't said already. Yeah, I think the final note is I'm impressed by how much, and we talk about this in terms of some of the short stories that we read for the speculative speculations podcast, like how much ground is covered in the course of 10 pages. This is 140 pages, and I think it touches upon so many themes, and it happens so organically throughout the story. I was continually impressed as I read through this, and I loved it. I enjoyed the story quite a lot. I had a question for you.
oh,
I have to do a bit of a, I don't know why this is important or like why I care about this, but it's something I do when I read books by, like when I love a book by an author. I have this already, like, I'm going to love their, I have this thought that I'm going to love their work. So when I read other things by them that I think I will love, I do a little bit of a bias check about, like, what if am I only liking this, or how much of my liking for this is because it's by this author and
oh,
not,
yeah.
um and like how does it stand on its own. So did you, what do
That's
you
a
think
great
in that
question.
regard?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, 'cause yeah, I would say I most likely have that bias when, going into an Erickson work that I haven't that's not Malazan. I even well, even when he comes out with a new Malazan book, I'm
Mhm,
gonna have that bias. That's really hard to overcome, but I think that's part of being a fan of
mhm,
an author's work. You know, you want whatever new thing you read by them to be just as cool and just as good
yeah,
as what you enjoyed in the past. So and
mhm,
maybe that bias, um, contributes to your enjoyment of the new item.
mhm,
Um, Whereas if you would have started with it, maybe you wouldn't have been as enamored
mm,
as you were from the original works that you first got enamored by.
yeah,
Who knows? Or maybe not. I mean, that's interesting because well, let me give you an example. My brother's first exposure to Erickson
mhm,
was through Rejoice,
mm,
and he loved it. And because he loved that, I gave him other stuff, you know. I gave him other homework. So, uh, but, you know, so is it just Erickson is that good no matter what he writes, or do we have a bias towards his stuff because
mm,
of what we've read with you know, we started
mm,
with Malazan? And yeah, that's a tough question.
yeah, yeah. I,
'Cause there
yeah,
are
sorry.
other authors where there are stuff that I
Mm,
haven't liked as much
mm,
as
mhm,
the seminal work that I read by them.
mm.
So it hasn't quite happened with Erickson yet. Uh, yet, we'll
Nice.
see.
I like that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't, but maybe it will. Who knows?
I think my bias check is usually how much I highlight, and like I said, I highlighted so much towards the end that, like, the man can write, and there's so many pretty lines, so many thought-provoking passages here. And if I if I hadn't known that this was Erickson, I think I would have liked those just as much. Maybe I like them a little bit more because it's like I already love his work so much, and I have another book that I
Hmm.
love by him. So, uh,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I are prone to analyzing as we read because we've
mm.
done this a lot. Um, so I think, we're looking for that stuff.
Mm,
We're looking for that stuff to highlight. We're looking for that stuff to stand out to
mm,
us as we read. Um, maybe that plays into our bias a little bit, who
maybe.
knows?
Yeah, yeah, maybe. Yeah, but this book made me think a lot, and yeah, if you choose to pick it up after listening to, well, I don't know that we spoiled it really, because did we tell you what's going on? Not really. We just talked about, I think, some high level notes of
Well,
if
yeah, it's tough to spoil because
yeah,
it's a thought idea.
yeah,
It's not like, "And the murderer is this
yeah,
guy." No, it doesn't, you know,
yeah, yeah,
um, it doesn't lend itself to that kind of spoiling.
yeah.
So it's, yeah, I gotta put that in the description, like, if you can still watch this if you haven't read the story,
Yeah.
because even though we talk about a lot of stuff that goes on in the story,
Mhm,
it's a thought experiment, it's an idea, and it's the themes and ideas that are important in this
mhm.
story,
Yeah.
rather than the whodunit,
A lot of people done it. The
Yeah,
entire
everybody did
human race done it.
it. We all did it. Alright, and, on that guilty note, we'll, hopefully, schedule something again for a short fiction side hustle, and I'm hoping that we will be exploring the next story in this collection called Revolvo.
Did you happen to go past the title page, of that story?
Of
Because the
course, I
first
didn't. Why would I do that?
you didn't look at the last page either? But here's your hook for the next story if you'd like to read along with us. Um, what
Oh yeah,
follows is possibly true, told to me off the record over 3 days and 3 nights by a cephalopod.
that's right. I did see that.
Yes.
Oh.
Mm,
And then it says never trust a writer, which is
yes.
absolutely true. Uh, all right,
Right.
cool.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks so much
Varsha.
for having me,
Yeah,
Jared.
thanks for
Yeah,
coming along.
yeah.
And for the rest of you out there, if you're still here, be good to each other, and we'll see you next time.